Okay, Dave. Today we're going to be going through the Chapter 14, Section 2 notes, Science and Exploration. If you remember the last video I put up, I had broken the Chapter 14 keynote down into the 4 individual parts, and we looked at Part 1 last time. So today we're going to get into the Science and Exploration portion. I'm going to try to do a couple of new things here. Obviously, I think you can see me down in one corner. Maybe if I keep the eagle eye on you guys, you'll actually pay attention to this video, or maybe it'll keep you from wanting to watch them anymore. I don't know. A couple of things that I want to point out here. We've got our little video of Bart Simpson, everyone's favorite. But what Bart is writing on the chalkboard says science and Christianity do not conflict. And during this time in history, that actually was exactly the opposite of what happened. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But the scientific revolution led to the birth of modern science, the science that you study today in school, whether it's biology, chemistry when you get to high school, physics, astronomy, all of the things that we think of as sciences today were really got going during this time of the scientific revolution in Europe. Science began to use logic, which meant that they focused on observation. They focused on things that they could see, feel, touch, measure, just like you do in science class now, in Miss Kelly's class. You measure things all the time. You record data. And this is in conflict with religion, the religion of the time, because religion is based on fact, or excuse me, religion is based on faith, not fact, exactly the opposite of what I just said. Religion is all about believing in things that you can't see or feel or touch or measure, and science is the opposite. So there was a conflict with religion. The church didn't always agree with what these new scientists were saying. For example, Galileo was arrested for saying the Earth wasn't the center of the universe. He was actually just confirming what another scientist, Nicholas Copernicus, he was an astronomer from Poland, had said, and Galileo did his own research and verified what Copernicus had said, but he published it in a book, saying that the Earth revolved around the sun and not the other way around, which was in direct conflict with the way that what the church taught, which was that the Earth was the center of the universe. So Galileo was arrested. He was only put in under home arrest, so he could stay at his home, but wasn't allowed to leave until he decided to change his mind, or pretend that he changed his mind, and turn around and say, oh yeah, I was just making all that up, because he wanted to get out of his house a little bit and get out of jail, I guess you could say. But really, when you look at it more closely, science could be used to explain a lot of the stories that were in the Bible. A lot of religious stories now had a scientific explanation for them. Inventions that were made during the scientific revolution made advancements in lots of different areas of life, and everything became much, much easier. Sir Isaac Newton was one of the famous scientists of the time. He made observations most famously about gravity. That's what Sir Isaac Newton is best known for. And let's see, if we click on him a little bit, we'll get pulled up to his Wikipedia page here. But some of the things that Sir Isaac Newton was known for: he was from England, he was a physicist, a mathematician, an astronomer, natural philosopher, an alchemist, and a theologian. And has been considered by many to be the greatest and most influential scientist who ever lived. So if you want to know more about Isaac Newton, you can certainly go to the internet and learn a little bit more about him. All of these inventions gave rise to exploration. Inventions like the telescope, the astrolabe, the compass that scientists were inventing ended up making it much, much easier for people to start exploring the world around them by ship. The inventions that we just discussed allowed for safer travel and longer trips. Remember, we're talking about people that were setting out aboard ships that were powered by wind, by sails, and they didn't have the benefit of GPS. They didn't have the benefit of even maps of the world, because they were figuring it out as they went along. So map making became very important, because these are the people in this time of exploration that actually made the maps that we see today. The use of a compass, something as simple as a compass, allowed them to have an idea of what direction they were heading, because before this they really didn't have any really good tools to help them on their travels. And when you talk about the age of exploration, it really boils down to two things. People were curious. you always have those people that want to find out what's out there, that want to know, what's beyond what's already known. So there was a lot of curiosity. So these people were very brave that decided to take these, to go on these trips and to try to find out what was out there beyond what the average person knew. And there was money involved. And primarily, we're still looking at a drive for people to get themselves to Asia, to get to India, to get to China, to get those spices and silks and things that we talked about. And we really haven't talked in detail about why spices were so important. Certainly they made food taste better, but you have to remember back in these times, there was no refrigeration. There was no fridge or freezer to put meat in, for example, to keep it from spoiling. So they salted food heavily, meat heavily, for example, to make it last. But when things are heavily salted, they don't necessarily taste great. So the spices that were coming from Asia could be added to the food to make it taste a little bit better. And also, and this sounds sort of gross to be honest, but as food started to spoil, people were pretty poor. They didn't have the luxury of just throwing things away and going to the store and buying more. So the spices would take away some of the spoiled flavor from the food so they could continue to eat it. But this meant that finding a way to get to Asia was something that you could make a lot of money if you could find another way. Okay. Again, the main target was Asia, getting from Europe to Asia. They were looking for easier water routes because Italy had pretty much locked down the routes from Europe to Asia over land. Okay, that travel route going by land was pretty much owned by the Italian traders. So Portugal and Spain decided that they're going to try to find ways to get to Asia without going over land. And so they start to explore along the west coast of Africa. And Portugal is really the first country that does this, that gets their explorers out. And they're making up the maps as they go. They're figuring things out as they travel on that west coast of Africa. And Vasco da Gama is the first explorer, and his crew, of course, that made it all the way around the tip of South Africa and found their way up into the Indian Ocean and to India and eventually China. So they had found a new water route to Asia so they could load their ships up with silks and spices and bring them back home to Europe to sell. And they could cut out the Italians now and make some money themselves. Christopher Columbus was another explorer, and he was again looking for a quicker way to get to Asia. And he decided instead of going south around Africa, that he would try to sail west and see if he could find a quicker route that direction. Remember, Europeans at the time had no idea that the Americas existed. The continents of North and South America were unknown to people. So he decided to take a western sea route. He was financed by Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain. They are the ones that paid for his ships and paid for his crew and all the things that he needed. And as it happened, after a few months at sea, they see land, Columbus and his men see land, and they land in what's nowadays the islands chain that we refer to as the Bahamas, which is pretty close to Florida. And initially thinking that they had found their way to India, they called the people that they found there Indians, but they quickly realized that they were mistaken. They hadn't found a way to India and Asia. They had actually found a brand new place that the people of Europe knew nothing about, that was quickly called the New World. Now, as these explorers are heading out and coming back to Europe with all their stories about the things that they've seen and the people that they've experienced, a new goal of exploration arises, which is who can be the first person to circumnavigate or travel all the way around the world. The first one to try it was Ferdinand Magellan. He died on this trip, unfortunately, but his crew made it. His crew survived and made it all the way around the world. And if you remember from our passport to the Renaissance, I believe it was, they talked a little bit about Magellan and his exploration, and he was shot with a poison arrow while he was in the Philippines, the island country of the Philippines in Asia. So that's where his trip ended, but his men made it the rest of the way. All right, the result of all this exploration, the big result was new empires. They found the water routes that they wanted to Asia, but what they also found was land all over the world that European countries decided to start claiming for themselves. And they started to set up colonies, places where people from Spain or Portugal or England or France would lay claim, and people from those countries would start moving there. And you can see from this map of Africa, and it's really the top half of Africa, a little bit more than the top half, it shows some of the breakdowns. The French pretty much claimed all of Western Africa. Italy claimed what's nowadays Libya and Somalia. The British, you can see that strip coming straight down with Egypt and the Sudan and Eritrea. Now, of course, there were people living in these places, but the Europeans had better technology in terms of weapons, for example, and they were able to overpower the native people that lived there. So when they encountered these new people, it wasn't a good deal for the people that were living there already, the natives of these places, whether it was the Americas or Africa or Asia. The Europeans definitely had this sense that they were better than these people, that they were more advanced, they were more civilized, and they somehow convinced themselves it was their right to take the land from these people. And as they started to settle and colonize these new areas, they found valuable resources that, again, could be brought back to Europe and sold. Lots of money could be made. So, the driving point of all of this colonization starts to become, there's stuff out there that we want, silver, gold, different types of food that weren't known in Europe, and we can make a lot of money by taking land from these people, or taking control of these lands and taking what we want. Okay, well, that's the end of section 2 of chapter 14. My little presentation here was a little rough. I wasn't able to do everything I wanted to do. I've got to figure some things out as far as marking up the screen here, but hopefully it worked out, and it's something I'll continue to do.